Hello, everybody. I'm hoping we're just getting everybody joining now. I can see, I can see we're up to a good number. Um, for those of you just joining and anyone that I have not met before, my name's Debbie Flynn, and I am the chair of the Anglo Jordanian Society. And we're really excited today to have Bettany Hughes here for our series of In Conversation with our first one of this year. Um, and Bethany, you have been on my list for one of these webinars ever since I became chair of the Anglo Jordanian Society, because I am lucky enough to have known you for a number of years. And I've met you on more than one occasion. And in fact, I think the last one was actually pre-COVID when we were in Jordan and we shared a lovely cup of tea in, I can't remember if it was Wadi Rum or Petra, but you
Yeah.
were on location. And for those of you that don't know how incredible Bethany is, let me kick off by telling you a little bit about her. So, Bettany Hughes OBE, which is significant here in the UK, and well done, is a multi award winning historian. She's an author and a broadcaster. And she really has devoted the last 25 years of her life to the vibrant and inclusive communication of the past. And it's the past that lots of us don't know about. She's pioneered and campaigned for female voices on international TV and is an ardent champion of inclusivity. Um, Diversity and change. And, way before it became a thing, right, Bethany? And was the first female historian ever to present a history series on the BBC. She's written and presented, which is incredible when I saw this earlier, over 50 TV and radio documentaries for the BBC, Channel 4, Netflix, Discovery, PBS, History Channel, Nat Geo, BBC World, Channel 5, ITV, and a number of these are truly award winning. And her programs are watched by over 500 million people worldwide. I mean, what a fantastic accolade. Your 2005 work, Helen of Troy, Goddess, Princess, Whore, a feminist reinterpretation of the Helen of Troy story, that's been translated into 10 languages and is the foundation of several university courses. I mean, that is incredible. Your second book, The Henlock Cup, Socrates, Athens and the Search for the Good Life, was a New York Times bestseller and shortlisted for the Writers Guild Award. Istanbul, a Tale of Three Cities, shortlisted for the Runkelman Award and was a Sunday Times bestseller, and has been translated to 15 languages. This is incredible. Venus and Aphrodite, A History of the Goddess, was shortlisted for the same award. Amazing. And your latest book, The Seven Wonders of the World, which hopefully we'll also talk about today, is on the bestseller list, including an instant Sunday Times bestseller. So we could talk for more than an hour, but we've got an hour. And today, on the whole, we're going to be discussing the treasures of Jordan, because everybody on this call has got a link to Jordan. They have lived there, they care about Jordan, there's a connection, and it's fantastic for everybody to know what a great ambassador you are for Jordan. And you're going to be discussing some of the challenges and surprises of the different filming that you've made there, and some of the research that you have been able to present across more than one TV series, haven't you? And I
Mhm.
think what's really important today to discuss is the value that historical investigation of the past brings to the present, and how truly that needs to be appreciated. As I say, you're a true ambassador for Jordan, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the time that you've spent in Jordan over the years and how it's enabled you to find this remarkable culture and brand new discoveries that you are sharing with the world, which is really important for Jordan as a country. And you've celebrated neglected voices among some of your programs, and also to understand how archaeology has shaped our understanding of humankind. I mean, there's a lot, isn't there? There's a lot to unpack. Um, so, Bethany, thank you for the time. And I think we might be going to share a clip before we get going. that
Yeah,
right?
I think that's a good idea. I just also just say, Debbie, thank you so much, and everybody who's on the webinar. I'm so grateful that you've joined. Thank you for giving up an hour of your time. We'll fill it with love for Jordan, so hopefully it'll be worth it. But also, I just wanted to say to everybody, thank you so much, particularly this week, for giving up your time, because as we know, it is an extremely intense time geopolitically, and I'm very aware of how incredibly closely Jordan is to the sharp and the business end of what's going on. And my heart goes out to everybody. And I just want to say, it's my honor to be here. And thank you so much for everybody who's doing so much work within and without of that country to try to ameliorate the terrible situation there. So I'm just, I sit in front of you with total humility today, and just thank you for giving up the time. We were actually having a quick chat before we started about whether we should show this clip, because it's so sort of bouncy and joyful, and whether it would feel appropriate this week. But we thought maybe it would be an idea for those of you if you haven't seen the program. So just to explain, we make a series called The Treasures of the World, and I was determined that in the first season I should do the treasures of Jordan. And I actually then did a second program, The Treasures of Arabia, and managed to get Jordan as a whole quarter of that film as well. So what you're seeing is just what's called in television speak the pre-titles. So these are the sort of bits at the beginning of the film that give people a taster for what's about to come. So as I said, it's very lively. The film itself is quite sober. We do a lot of proper history. We visit a lot of archaeological sites, speak to a lot of experts, but this is the sort of splashy bit at the front. So Dima, if it's possible, if we could play just that, the little clip. Thank you. Oh, are you getting sound okay?
No,
Aha.
we Dima is our tech expert. Let's see whether we go back and try
We could do it at the
get
end.
sound.
An adventure by land and
Oh,
sea to the most fascinating places. It is just extraordinary. Where I've been given special access to significant and surprising treasures. Some of the most remarkable artworks to survive from antiquity, buried in ancient sites, extraordinary buildings, and glorious works of art. I'm in search of the treasures that help to explain the story of us. Journey with me to discover how the past shapes our lives. I'm here to uncover the rich history of the ancient kingdom of Jordan, a vital crossroads between East and West, and a cultural hub for millennia. Enjoying privileged access to the secrets of one of the world's most spectacular wonders, Petra, exploring an ancient city dubbed the Pompeii of the East, the mountaintop palace where John the Baptist was beheaded, and fearsome fortresses of the Crusader Knights, and discovering how Jordan is a mosaic of civilizations. Welcome to the Treasures of Jordan.
amazing. That just gives a taste, doesn't it, Bettany? And I guess everybody probably on the webinar is, if they're not already in Jordan, is thinking, when's the next time I'm going to go?
Yeah.
Just make, it's definitely, having worked with Jordan for, over 25 years, there's never enough time that you can
No.
go back there, is there? So before we talk about Jordan specifically, I'd be really interested to know, with everything that's going on all over the world geopolitically, why, and I'm sure everyone on this call would agree with you that it's important, but why are you so passionate about making history programs, and maybe if you can talk about that with a relevance to some of the stuff that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, because it's always the question of, is what we're doing central to what's happening in the world, or are we sort of fiddling around on the edges? And, these are all things that happened a long time ago. And do we need to focus on the past when the present is so contested? But I think something I always carry with me as a historian is a bit of science and a bit of etymology. So the science, because obviously, as you can tell, I'm very, very passionate about history, very passionate about archaeology. I've devoted my life to it. I walk around in the 21st century, but in my head, I'm often in the Bronze Age or the Iron Age. You know, it's where I live. So I knew it mattered. I knew that surely it had to help us as a species to access that kind of reservoir of truth and ideas and inspiration and successes and failures. But then luckily science caught up with us historians. And I don't know if there are any neuroscientists in the audience tonight, but we now know that we don't carry memory in a sort of chest of drawers in our brain. Memory sits right across the synaptic connections of our brain, and we cannot have a future thought unless we access a memory of some kind. So our memories create our future thinking. So if we deny the past, if we try to pretend it doesn't matter, if we try to forget it, if we try to sort of squash it down within our lives, then it's not just that we're ignoring history, it's not just that we're thinning out our present, we're actually cauterizing our potential as a species in terms of our creation of the future. So it's more than just learning from our mistakes. Physiologically, at a molecular level, we are creatures of memory. So memory really, really matters. And I think that's one of the reasons that instinctively we are drawn to history stories, why we tell one another what we did last weekend, why we share, you know, even our own personal and very recent histories. It's because we understand we have to replay those in order to have better ideas about the future. So scientifically, our brains were on our side. We are creatures of memory. And I'm also very touched by the fact that if you look at the etymology of the word history, historia itself is a Greek word. And I am a great fan of the Greeks, but the Greeks are very good at writing themselves into history. And they tell us that they invented the notion of history with Herodotus, the father of history. Of course, it's a notion that goes way, way back before the Greeks. But history itself comes from a very ancient Proto-Indo-European root, which is wid tor. And a wid tor is a wise agent of some kind. So there was a notion that with history, by definition, came wisdom, and wid tor also gives us our word wisdom. So wisdom and history are umbilically linked as word ideas. So it sort of gives us an idea as to why history matters, why we need it, why we can't ignore it. And I think in terms of promoting this on television, as we all know, there is so much falsehood that comes out of the rectangles that we're all looking now, you know, whether it be in our pockets or on our desktops or in our living rooms. And history, if it's done authentically and with the correct motivation, allows people to have their own opinions about the roots of their story. And it feels to me ever more, as we all know, history is so politicized. There's a dangerous tendency in some television programs to really sensationalize it. You know, the classic thing to say that these ancient monuments were not only built by aliens, but were all being prevented from understanding the truth of what went before. And these are very, very popular television programs. So it feels incredibly important in that kind of white noise of inauthenticity to get authentic history out to the world. And as you said, Debbie, you know, very fortunately, people vote with their feet, and as you say, about 500 million people a year watch these history programs, and they're very straightforward history. You know, we're not claiming extraordinary discoveries in each one of them. We're not, you know, we're not sort of creating fake history, but people are just drawn to them because they want to understand the past. So I think that, you know, we all know that geopolitically it's incredibly important to be honest about the history that's happened, and it's through understanding that history, I think, really can be a moral agent. So it can help us make the right decisions about our own presence and therefore about other people's futures.
I think those are very wise words. I'm very glad. I must make sure my son watches a recording of this because he's studying history.
Oh, perfect.
But you put it. I mean, you know, again, I don't know how many people on the webinar have watched your programs, but I would urge them to you because we'll talk about storytelling later, but you bring such energy, and you know, you explain how things come together, and what, you know, in a way that's just fun. And so therefore, as you say, people are taking this in, and I love that definition there. So tell me about the treasures of the world, because you've done so many other things. Where did the idea come from in terms of initiating this? Because it's not easy, is it, to get a series on TV when it starts with an idea?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right, and it's a funny thing with television that we always find our job if I have a double life. I'm a historian and I'm a filmmaker, and our job as filmmakers is to make it look incredibly easy, like we've just kind of woken up in the morning, drifted onto a site, met charming and interesting people, been shown some archaeology, and then we sort of go home and have a glass of Chardonnay. And of course, it's, as you well know, it's not like that. They're 12-hour days, things go wrong, we're crashing around. We have to raise all the support and finance and patronage for each and every single film. You have to argue your case for every film. So you're right, it's not easy, even if we try to sort of make it look unstressy on when you see it on the screen. But the Treasures of the World very specifically was something that we started during lockdown, because we were just so aware that people, first of all, felt very contained, very sad, very anxious about the idea of not being able to physically travel, because as we all know, if you travel, you learn about others and about yourselves. So it was really, really hard for people psychologically, not just being trapped in their own homes or in their own countries, but just because they couldn't access the benefits, the kind of nourishing benefits of travel. So we thought, gosh, well, we can't invent a vaccine, but the one thing that we can do is prove to the world that there is still a big, beautiful world out there. So we'll try to go to a lot of places which often don't end up getting on television. So the Treasures of the World series came to Jordan. We also went to some countries like Azerbaijan, which I don't think there'd been a history documentary series made about Azerbaijan up until then, really to help people see that, we lived in a world where we were able to cross borders and boundaries, that we're very resilient, that we've been through terrible times before, and that there was still a joyful landscape out there. So it was a sort of, that was our motivation to do it. We didn't know whether it would work, whether people would want to watch it. And we're now on our 5th season, on our 30th program. And it really, I'm very proud of it, because, as I said, we often tell quite small, intimate stories of people from the past, or of people that we meet along the way. So there's a very kind of human focus to the series. So it doesn't have to be kind of the big, bold headline history moments. And I was just thinking about what you were saying about sort of enjoying history. And one of the reasons I do is because you're never alone. I'm surrounded by all these characters, even though they've been dead for hundreds and often thousands of years. Your job as a historian is to try to understand them, to try to have empathy with them. And I think it is emotional. I don't think it's a kind of purely academic neutral thing. I think we have to admit that you bring your own personality and your own ideas to that relationship with the past, but to be surrounded by those people of the past is very nourishing, and that's turned out to be the case with the Treasures of the World. So, as I said, I think it proved that the very fact that we have a history that stretches back over, maybe much further than 200,000 years, shows that we are resilient as a species. It's transporting to see those kinds of places on television, and it allows you to travel mentally and as well as physically. So yeah, so that was why we did it, and it's a very happy surprise that it's lasting so long. I've got to say, actually, one of the what we might well be doing as a sort of extension of the Treasures of the World is to start a new series about the greatest cities on Earth, both ancient and modern. So if there's anybody who's watching this webinar who thinks there's a particular city we should visit, or who would like to get involved, or make contact with me afterwards, this is how we make films happen. As I said, it's not like you don't walk into the BBC and they give you a big menu and say, which film would you like to make? You have to force it through yourself. So genuinely, Amman obviously has to be one of the cities that we deal with, but it would be genuinely really interesting to hear if people have other ideas about places that they would like to see on screen.
That's a great question. And actually, I went to Baku for the first time. the COP a few weeks ago, and I had a totally different expectation. And
Yeah.
the very modern and the very old there is an amazing combination as a city break. And I think what, you know, being in the travel business myself, I think what happened to so many people around the world during the pandemic is they weren't allowed to go anywhere, and suddenly it makes you think about, well, where do I want to go? And I do want to know more about things. And so what I think you bring with all of your TV work that's really important is some people will maybe never go to those places, but they're learning about them, and it's just great entertainment and educational, etc. And then you are also, with all of those countries, you are encouraging people to choose that destination for that reason, because they, you know, they're interested in the history. You can't go anywhere. I mean, everything everywhere's got a past, hasn't it? And
Yeah.
what is that past, and what's the connection? I think the travel's just gone that level deeper now, where you hear about people really caring about authenticity, and there's so much more in terms of even the travel product out there that involves the local community. So I think things have changed, and you know, you deciding to do that, you know, what's 5 years ago now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Actually, it's
Yeah.
incredible.
Oh, well, thank you. That's right. No, it's certainly it's a real pleasure to go to this place, and people seem to, you know, enjoy hosting us. And it's really interesting, actually. You'd be interested in this, Debbie, that when we did a series about the Nile in Egypt, the bookings from cultural tours to the Nile, the month following the transmission of the film, went up by 4 times in the UK. And the Times newspaper did a big article about it. So we know that there is a very direct impact from people seeing it on screen and then booking. And I think you're absolutely right about the unexpected stories. So Baku in Azerbaijan, you know, is a perfect case in point where I knew as a historian that it was said that the Romans had got to the Caucasus and there were, you know, Roman battles. And we went right up to Dagestan and the border with Russia, where there was an archaeologist on this freezing Caucasian hillside was digging a Roman cemetery, you know, which proved that the Romans had got that far, which is extraordinary. And then on the same trip, I've been reading a lot about the Amazons, you know, the mythical warrior women, Amazons, and had always been very interested in this idea of female fighters. And of course, actually, a lot of graves with female graves with weapons in have been discovered. And there's always been this question: is that just ceremonial? Were they just being given the daggers of their husbands? You know, was it to protect them in the afterlife? And we went to a dig in an exclave of Azerbaijan, where they were uncovering these Bronze Age female graves, a number of them. And the women had been buried with weapons. And so I was able to pick up and hold these incredible obsidian arrowheads. So, you know, 3,500-year-old arrowheads made of this volcanic glass, absolutely perfect, not a chip on them. And look at the extraordinary daggers that the women were buried with, and the jewelry. So they were obviously women of great status. But then when you looked at the human remains, at the bone material, they had clearly gone into battle, because the number of cuts and slashes they had to the front of it, it's always the thing, you know, when you're at the front of your face or your arms, means that you're fighting, you're not running away. And also, these are women who had sustained and systematic injuries but had healed, and then they'd clearly been put back out to fight. And the kind of final clincher is that a number of these female skeletons from this region buried in graves like this, their hip bones are incredibly splayed, which shows that they would have been in the saddle a lot of the time, and their fingers are warped because of the number of times that they were firing arrows. So far more than you would fire if you were just using arrows to hunt. You would have to be using that in conflict, and you can absolutely see the changes on their fingers. So that was an incredible thing that we just weren't expecting to find there. Evidence of what you would call Amazons, of female fighters. And then we sat in a village at the end of the evening and told them what we'd been doing. And I said, oh, do you know, out of interest, do you tell any stories about female warriors here? Is that sort of part of your storytelling and oral tradition? And I was sitting with 3 generations of women, and a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter. And the grandmother looked at me sort of slightly as if I was mad. I thought, oh, well, you know, this is obviously not going to elicit an answer. And she said, Well, they aren't stories. My great-grandmother would cover her head, pretend to be a man, get on her horse, ride down from the mountainside to fight. So we are those women. And, you know, again, that's one of those incredible moments where it was a chance meeting, but suddenly the archaeology and the experience in the 21st century matched up. So it's very important to go to these places which aren't necessarily on the history, or certainly not on the tourist map, because actually you find histories that are very universal, that are appreciated by a really wide audience. So that's why when we come, you know, we're absolutely not just helicoptering in and out. We stay in places, we travel, we kind of sleep locally, so that we can have those chance encounters with people.
That's your science. That's your science meeting your historian there, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Or should I say, silent witness, eat your heart out?
Yeah. I know. Well, it was one of those moments where we're sort of saying, "Oh my gosh, look, what are we seeing?" But from women who'd lived 3,500 years ago.
So, from on the same subject of archaeology, I mean, there are so many amazing sites in Jordan. How do you decide which ones to concentrate on? I mean, that must be really tricky.
Oh, I mean, Jordan in particular. And I have to say, Debbie, you know this, I'm determined to make a whole series on Jordan. Basically, I will die happy once I've managed to do that. So it's my absolute, you know, it's something I have in my sights, and I would really, really love to do, and would love to collaborate to make that work. Because as you said, you know, where on earth do you start when choosing places to feature? And I suppose there's sort of three things that we have to, thinking about the television programs very, very much, you know, in particular, obviously different to the material that turns up in books or in lectures, but in television, something that television loves the new. And fortunately for us, the new in archaeology can still be 15 years old. It can still be something that was discovered 15 or 20 years before, but has only recently been published or recently been reanalyzed. And if we can access digs where the palpable excitement of seeing material come out of the earth can be shared with the audience, that's a brilliant thing. But of course, most people don't have the chance to go on digs. You know, I'm incredibly lucky because I do, but most people don't. So to be able to sort of transmit that enthusiasm to them through live digs. So something, recent discoveries are something that we talk to archaeologists, get that kind of network going. And again, I'm just saying, because there'll be people in the webinar, if there's anything particular you think we should be featuring this year or next year, please let me know, because we would come and do that with, you know, great respect. What you're loosely trying to do in the films as well is to do a sort of historical arc of a place. So to look at a kind of prehistoric period, you know, what you might call Stone Age, early Bronze Age, then something which is what loosely classical, then probably something from the Roman period, and then medieval, but you're walking through the modern landscape, so that people, even if they don't realize it, they're getting a kind of overview of a country's history. Because I always think it's not dumbing down. It's the opposite of dumbing down. I remember Simon Sharma, you know, the famous historian, saying to me he was sick of people saying that he was dumbing down by doing television, because he was saying actually the mental gymnastics it takes to reduce a really complicated argument. I mean, you have this the whole time when you write as well, to one sort of paragraph. Actually, that takes a lot more mental effort than sometimes writing a kind of short academic paper where you can just qualify and footnote and endnote. So I think, you know, you always have to remember when you're making these films that you're putting them out to audiences who don't know that they're interested in what you're showing them. And they've had tough days at work, you know, their boss has been horrible to them, there's a problem with one of their kids, you know, they've got very limited time, they've got a lot of call on their time. So you have to put out material that proves how clever the audience is. It's not proving anybody's cleverness in the film, it's making the audience realize how clever they are by adding knowledge to their evening, or, you know, whenever the programs go out. So I think it's putting that material out in a very accessible way, but making sure it's fresh in terms of scholarship and archaeology, and as I said, giving a kind of overview of the country. But you're absolutely right, Jordan. I mean, where do you think, is there some sort of, for instance, that you think you must go there next year or this year. I keep on forgetting we're in 2025 already,
Well,
but
I still think, there's more and more things being discovered at Petra, aren't there? I mean, I think one of the things to that strikes me is that people think they've done Petra.
yeah.
For those that have, I mean, obviously it's still one of those places that is top of people's wish list. It's just a question of, if I'm talking about the general public here, trying to get them to put it to the top of the wish list and actually go. But I think there's been more discoveries in Petra, haven't there? And to maybe go a bit deeper, because it's such a great story, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Oh, it is. And actually, it might be the time for us to show some of these. We've got photographs from the travels and from the dig. So I don't know if we could have those running as
Oh
just
yeah.
talking now. So if you want to pop them up. So you're absolutely right. Obviously extraordinary discoveries in Petra and the kind of wider archaeological park there. As we all know, some people go and do a sort of particular route, but actually, it's extraordinary what can be discovered. We were filming there, so I'm sorry there are so many photos of me, by the way. I don't have a massive ego, but we were trying to find images from the shoot, and of course they all end up being the publicity still. So just to say, I'm very sorry, guys. So you've already got enough of my face, but this is just showing you some of those incredible sites. That yes, a lot more to discover in Petra, in that wider archaeological park. And I urge anybody that I see to go, just to say now is the time, because I know from you, Debbie, that's been horrifically affected. Tourism's been very badly affected by what's going on. I know it's down by a terrible percentage. I can't even say because it's so disturbing. So now is a time to go. You will get the most incredible welcome, as you always do. This is one of my particular friends who always meets me at Petra. We end up hanging out and having tea together. So it's an extraordinary and huge site, but also, I would go to Jerash. I would go to the north as well, and to witness some of the discoveries that are happening there too. So we will go back and we will film in Petra again. I mean, something that we've got coming up that hasn't been formally announced, but I thought the Anglo-Jordanian Society would be interested to hear about this, is that we're making a new series about the story of the Nabateans. So we're going to just tracing the Nabatean trail from Oman all the way through to the Bay of Naples, because of course, as great traders of incense, as we all know, the Romans were obsessed with incense. So there was a Nabatean permanent colony in the Bay of Naples. And again, probably people on this call will know about this, but there's an incredible altarpiece to the Nabatean great sun god Dushara under the waves in the Bay of Naples, which again kind of shows their reach and shows how integrated both the culture was, both from the Arabian Peninsula and Europe. So there's a lot more to say about the Nabateans, and we made that film just because we were so sick of people saying, oh, but they didn't write about themselves, so you can't really tell their story. But of course, I think, incredible discoveries. Actually, Petra Museum is one of my favourite museums. I think the collection there and the Nabatean finds there are exceptional. It's a beautiful size, really easy to go and have a look around. You're not sort of overwhelmed by it. We can probably stop the slides now. I think we're getting back onto seeing me striding across the same landscape again. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for showing.
They are great. And technology. Is there anything that's happening from a tech perspective that is enabling you to research in a different way or share things in a different way, either recently or going forward?
Yeah, I mean, incredible technology. And actually, again, in Petra, there's really interesting science being applied in Petra at the moment, which works both for television and for archaeological research. That there's a beautiful thing called luminescence dating, which was actually came out of nuclear research and technology, where you are physically measuring ancient sunlight. So you're finding, you can measure when sun last hit a particular stone or a particular side of a particular stone. And this is being applied, it's incredible, this, Debbie. So this is being applied, I know, in Petra at the moment to look at the water systems. We all know that Petra famously had extraordinary water engineering and water systems, but there's a lot of channels which hadn't been identified as water channels in the past, and they're being studied through this luminescence dating. So that's something which, you know, for us as filmmakers and archaeologists, that we can share. Many other things though, LiDAR scanning, ground penetrating radar, red technology. There are all these things that we can use as filmmakers and that we can share with archaeologists and vice versa. I've just, again, I can't, annoyingly, this is something I can't talk about because we haven't even announced the series yet, but you know, I've written a book on the 7 wonders of the world, and we are doing some filming around that. And I was just with somebody who'd been working in the Great Pyramid, and the scanning within the Great Pyramid is incredible. I mean, that's just going to, when that comes out, it's going to rock everybody's world, what's being discovered there. So it's there's a lot of technology that is constantly applied both to archaeology and to the work that we do as filmmakers.
Well, but I've got a few more questions, but I am loving the fact that we're getting some questions in the chat. And one of my actually oldest friends, who I was in Marrakesh with only last weekend, Mahmoud, who worked with the Jordan Tourism Board, but now lives in Morocco, has asked if there's anything you can tell us about the new tombs that have been discovered under the Treasury.
That's right, which then caused a bit of a stir because I won't say there was another television maker who sort of talked about it as if they discovered it. I understand. I was actually away filming when that happened, so I think there was a slight kind of sleight of hand in pretending that they'd just been identified, because of course these have been known about kind of for over 15 years. But yes, just proving to people that the Treasury was a giant tomb. You know, because again, as you know, sort of myths still circulate about it. And I've been down into the tombs, but I've never worked with the bone evidence from there. But it's incredible being in the tombs. I got to jump down again, one of those negotiations on a filming day. We were sort of basically begging those in charge to let us in, and eventually we got the yes. And so you'll see, I jumped down. I'm so excited to be in there. But that's just what the Nabatean use of their tombs. We're only beginning to understand how sophisticated that was in terms of the orientation of the tombs to the rising and the setting sun, the fact that these were communal places that completely cemented the bonds, the ties of kith and kin in the Nabatean society, the fact that, as you know, people would come and sit out and have share meals and dinners and as if they were sharing them with their ancestors, and it was a real cement in Nabatean society, that the culture of enjoying communicating with your ancestors and with your dead ones. It's really interesting, actually. I've just been in Estonia filming the treasures of Estonia. And there as well, that tradition of having dinner with your ancestors in cemeteries is absolutely alive and well. So we were there for their Orthodox Christmas. So I was there on the 6th of January. And in these very beautiful cemeteries, which are out in forests, again, very close to the Russian border, so it's very wild. We went on Christmas Eve, and again on Christmas Day, it was absolutely full of people. There are benches everywhere, and it just made me think of those Nabatean tombs, and with families sitting, sharing a meal with their ancestors, and talking not to them, but just as if they were there as a very comforting, natural presence within a family meal. So, you know, it's fantastic to see those kinds of examples in the 21st century, which help you imagine the distant past, particularly within Nabatean culture.
And I think shows, again, going back to that authenticity and people really wanting to understand how people live now. So another question that's coming from Richard Rizzo, who is another great fan of Jordan. I'm glad you're here, Richard. He wants to know what your favorite archaeological site is in Jordan. And he says his is Maccareus,
Yeah.
because his favorite opera is Salome, and also Al-Beda. Don't know if you've got any views you could share with the audience on those.
Yeah, Macareus, I mean, I agree. It's an extraordinary site, Macareus, and the kind of notion of these places, which are, of course, dotted across Jordan, where the Bible happened. You know, I mean, it is an incredible thing to think that this is where John the Baptist was held, and that extraordinary story of Salome. But also, what I love about that site and about its neighbouring sites as well, and it's not talked about often, this is that Herod was very inspired by the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and there were gardens there and on other fortified the citadels as well, with this notion that they were very actively trying to recreate the Hanging Gardens of Babylon in what is now Jordan. It was a sort of cool bit of, you know, urban planning and garden design. So they had these hanging gardens, which were actually some of the Romans who came over then saw them in what's now Jordan and took those ideas back to Rome. So, for instance, you know, Nero in his Domus Aurea had a kind of version of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. So that's what I love about these places, is that they're so absolutely embedded into our understanding of the world, and so inspirational and influential to other places and times in history too. But yeah, so I agree, Macareus is definitely one of my favorite. Yeah.
And that sort of brings me on to, maybe you've answered this question, but my next question was going to be about why it's so important for the world to really be interested in cultural heritage.
Well, of course, the sort of very sobering answer to that is that we know something matters when people try to destroy it. And the fact that the destruction of tombs and churches and sites of special archaeological interest is often affected as an act of war proves that it matters, because these are places where there are shared memories that were created through a shared experience. And so if you attack something like that, you're destroying the morals and the hope of a society. And that's one of the, we all know it's why people choose to destroy things. Unfortunately, it makes very good visual clickbait now as well. The fact that you can destroy something. I mean, this has been described a lot, that actually you see a very visceral destruction in front of you, and that's what's filmed. And then what's actually happening behind the camera is that material is being taken away to be sold. So that actually it's only a tiny fraction of the material that you see that's being destroyed, and that's almost a bit of kind of theatre, the theatre of war. So that's a very sort of depressing reason why we know it matters. But of course, these are places that are freighted with meaning and memory. It always strikes me, in times both good and bad, we're often inspired to go and gather in those places because we know they connect us back to the generations of experience that are behind us, not just to a particular history, but to the to the lived experience. And I've kind of felt that very keenly when I was writing this book on the Seven Wonders, that you realise that wonder is something that we're drawn to, as I said, in times both good and bad, because if we are inspired to wonder, we engage, and if we engage, we understand, and if we understand, we care, and if we care, we love. So it actively promotes us to care not just about the bricks and mortar, but about the people who generated these extraordinary buildings, or who are choosing to experience them in the present day.
And I guess that's why the storytelling side is so incredibly important, because you don't know if people understood the story and history behind some of the things. I mean, I remember we did some work pro bono for Ukraine last year, and we were interviewing people that were part originally of the travel community, and obviously they were, on the war front. And one of them was the museum director, and there was this incredible interview with him where he was describing how the whole community got together to take everything from the museum and bury it so it was safe, to protect the future history when peace does come, that they haven't lost all of that.
Yes.
That's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so important. If you think about it, we all do that on a personal level. If someone, that we love dies, we will often hold keep one object of theirs and touch it. And it's, you know, if you think about it, it's illogical, but it's not. It really means something. And through that touch, you are connected to others. And yeah, exactly. I can imagine what's happening in Ukraine. And actually, again, just to let the people, you know, on this webinar know that one of the things that we're working on this year is a big series about the illegal antiquities trade and the looting of sites at times of war, which is going to be quite a lively one to film, but incredibly important to do. I've just spotted in the chat as well two questions. Somebody talking about Chania in Crete, absolutely talking about one of the greatest cities of the world, and I completely agree. It's Marcia, I think, isn't it? Who's left that message? Is that right? Yeah, Chania is an extraordinary place in Crete, on the northern coast of Crete, as you say, continuously inhabited from the early Bronze Age through till now, with the modern city built slap bang on top of the ancient city. So it's very hard for archaeologists. So it means that we can only dig there when there's rescue archaeology. But actually, I mean, again, this is a kind of rather gruesome example to share. But when we were last there, they were excavating a Bronze Age palace, which had suffered an earthquake. And they realised that there'd been an earthquake, first earthquake, and then a second one. And after the first earthquake, not only had animals been sacrificed, but it looked like a teenage girl had been sacrificed, obviously as a sort of propitiation to the gods. And this is at exactly the same time that the stories of the Odyssey were being told and set. When, of course, in the Iliad and the Odyssey, in the stories of the Trojan War, you have Agamemnon sacrificing his eldest daughter because he wants to have the right wind so that he can sail to fight at Troy. And he believes that by doing this, he will keep the gods of the sky and the earth on side. And so much, you know, scholarly ink has been spilt saying, was this just a kind of, a sort of simile? Was it just a kind of fantasy? But actually, we know from the archaeological evidence that that is something that was happening in the Bronze Age. And it was a teenage girl who was probably the daughter, probably wasn't just a sort of local farmer, was probably the daughter of the household, because sacrifice means to make sacred. So you would obviously sacrifice your dearest and most precious things. So Chania, absolutely, Chania would be one of the cities that I would definitely want to make a film about.
That's an extraordinary story, and just looking at the chat, because there's a lot of interest. I love it. So this is Bob Bewley. Have you met Bob?
I have. So
yeah, he does the filming of tries to find the archaeological sites that from the air. He's been doing it for years.
Yeah, with Bob and I being very discreet. So I have met Bob. I've been in a helicopter with Bob not that long ago over Jordan with the Royal Jordanian Air Force, and looking at which is you will all know about, the extraordinary identification of these Roman forts, and that is going to be in the new film series that I can't completely talk about, but hope to have a premiere of in London so we can launch it with everybody. Yeah. So Bob, I know that you're listening. I want to get back in a helicopter with you and go and look for some more archaeology.
Well, I've never been in a helicopter with Bob, but what he wants to know.
You should. It's great fun.
Where have you missed out that you haven't been able to film yet?
I mean, so many places. I think what I would love to do is to do a whole documentary about these. Again, people probably know about this on the webinar, but these really ancient so-called kites. So these hunting, basically what they look like, they're sort of Stone Age structures which look as though they're made to help with hunting, and they're called kites because they look a bit like a kite or a key shape, and you basically got a kind of round end and in effect a funnel into which animals were sent in order to be hunted. But actually there are incredible finds coming out from Jordan where people are realizing that these kind of kite shapes are almost a sort of branding for the society at that time, and they're recreating like mini kites. They're using this symbol on their pots. They're doing artworks made from them, and it seems to be something which it really matters to those early societies. So I think that would be something that I would love to do. And then wouldn't it be brilliant, Levantine society and the idea of Jordan as being central to that is so important. And I think ever more, we need to be reminding people of that. So it would be beautiful to finally do the 3-part series, starting right back in the Stone Age and coming up probably to the late 20th century to talk about the centrality of Jordan in that Levantine civilization in its broadest sense.
Well, you never know, do you? Who's actually watching this that might be able to help you find the funding to do just a dedicated Jordan program only? Because I know it's been on your wish list for a lot of time. We're getting some great comments here. Thank you, everybody. Now, Helen is asking about the kites that are huge in Saudi Arabia, and she would love to hear a little bit more about any knowledge you've got there.
Yes, yeah. Well, exactly. So we have been filming some of those in Khaybar in Saudi. And again, if you've seen the previous films, we're very much wanting to kind of, as I said, talk about the connections through those incense routes of Nabateans and other communities going further back. So yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. They're enormous. They're 5 kilometers long. Some of these kite systems, these huge sort of hunting structures. And just the sophistication and the creation of them. And if you look at them, Bob will know this, if you look at them from above, it's like, when you look down at grass and you're looking at an ant's nest and suddenly your eyes come into focus and you realize that the grass is crawling with ants. It's the same with these kites. Once you get your eye in, you can see them. So yes, Helen, yeah, they are enormous there. And again, it's, as you know, incredibly exciting archaeological work that's being done on them both in Jordan and in Saudi.
And Helen, we
You
will
said you'd
take
love
you
to
up for
share
more offer.
experiences and thoughts. I would love that too, Helen.
Yeah.
Let's do that offline.
Yeah, Helen has been recently introduced to me as somebody that I think would very much enjoy being part of the society. So thank you for that. So we haven't got too much longer left, but we can take a couple more questions. But in the meantime, I guess we can be hopeful for the future in terms of the work that you're doing is really helping to have for people out there, wherever they're from, because I know that Channel 4 is UK, but everything's global now, isn't it? To have a better understanding of history, and maybe people will be more respectful in the future if they do have that deeper understanding, particularly the younger generation.
Yeah.
I don't know, what do you think?
Well, you hope so, don't you? And I think, sort of as I was saying before, the huge boon of history is that you're never alone, that you have characters, individuals have often been through things as you are going through them, or are worse off and have yet survived. And I always think that actually thinking about Greek poetry, I think that great female poetess Sappho, who was writing, 2,600 years ago, who writes so beautifully about the experience of love, for instance. She describes it as though you have a fire crawling under your skin. She's the first woman or the first human to describe love as bittersweet, although she says it's sweet and then bitter, which is probably a bit more accurate. And I sort of think, I wish that Sappho could be taught in every school, just so that all those teenage kids didn't feel like they were alone and didn't feel like they had to look at their phone and feel less than others or feel confused by the fact that they were feeling, kind of passionate about those in the world, that this is something that everybody has gone through, even if you're separated by centuries. So I think it can just be, as I said, I'm a great fan of the praxis of history. I think it can have real practical application and psychological application too. And you also feel now, in a world where so much that we live in is virtual, the fact that archaeology gives us something authentic and unique. There can often be only one pot of one kind that has survived. And I think, that gives it even more resonance. And also, wouldn't it be brilliant if, as well as artificial intelligence, we valued ancestral intelligence? And we did learn from those in the past. And, so I think history does have a very hopeful future. And both in the UK, but definitely internationally too, and is ever more salient and urgent that we share history now.
Absolutely, and that's why this has been such a fascinating chat. I think we should go on for ages. So Firaz has said he hopes to see us back soon. I'm hoping that I will get out to Jordan very soon myself. I don't know when your next plans are, Bettany. Is it set in stone, or is it dependent on,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
depends on getting an invite. Invite me and I'll come.
okay. And yeah, no, and there's a lovely comment in the chat as well from Marcia about touching and feeling history from an experience that um she experienced. So that's a nice one about
Yeah,
archaeology,
yeah,
going through the
absolutely.
layers there.
Oh, and somebody's asked me about my name, Bethany. I think, I don't mine. I love my name, and I'm sure it is related to Bethany, as in Bethany beyond the Jordan. And um, as I said, there's a bit of sort of family mists over how I got given my name. One day I'll share this, but I have an unusual start to life. So I do love it, and it's lovely to come to a country where I see my name. Although my name has got two T's in it, and it drives me mad when people put an H in it. It gets auto corrected on all, so half the emails don't get to me because people put an H in it. So I'm sort of shielded from the world. But thank you. I'm very proud to have a name that has its roots in Jordan.
That is a great comment. And then I think there's one more we can get away with. Have you anything to say about the oldest plaster figures in the Citadel Museum in Amman?
Yeah, nothing. I've got nothing interesting or new to say, and I think there are, people on this particular webinar who far more qualified than I to talk about them archaeologically, but they're just extraordinary. So that's an example again when you go to, and this is something that I always say to people: to go into that museum. It's so totally charming, and again, just our ability to connect to people who lived many thousands of years before, when you look at their generation of those kinds of extraordinary, meaningful, soulful artifacts, is both very inspiring and humbling, I think. And that's, that is the joy of history, is that it gives you total perspective. So I think filmmaking makes you very positive because you have to solve problems the whole time. Being a historian gives you perspective.
Well, you are a very positive person, and this has been, I've loved every minute of this, and from the different comments in the chat box. So have lots of people. We'll make sure we share with everybody the links, because it's very easy to look back at all of your shows. I had a re-peek at some of them over the weekend. Find the Channel 4 app, but also we'll make sure that people have links to where to buy the book, and also as new things come up, that they know where to find you. So thank you for being a really important part of our Jordan community. We value your ambassadorship and the fact that you really do love Jordan.
Yeah, I really do. There's no doubt. I'm not faking that at all. I absolutely do. So thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you for being such a generous host, and thank you everybody else for spending the time to chat. And hopefully I'll see some of you in Jordan soon.
I hope so. And yes, we've recorded this, which will be shared with everyone. So thank you very much, and everybody enjoy the rest of your evening.
Love,
Take
yeah.
care. Thanks.
Lovely
Thanks,
to
Beth.
see you. Bye-bye. Bye.